Great news, folks. Great news. We got Ted Cruz months ago in a conversation give everybody the right idea, especially DeSantis. Hopefully, Abbott, before it's all said and done. Abbott has been pushing migrants all across the map as best he can, from Chicago, Illinois, Washington D.C., New York. They're now shipping them up to Martha's Vineyard. We've got DeSantis and Abbott on board with shipping as many illegals around and out of the state as they can, send to those really lovely locations like Kamala Harris's front yard. I love it. I love it. I think it's great. I don't know what else to do with this situation since we can't send them back home. Let's send them somewhere where they're at least in the public's eye to let the whole world know that Kamala Harris is lying. The border is not closed. And just with these stunts these two Republicans have pulled, I think it is a great eye opener for all these people that are lying on television. About 900 million fake news correspondents are now having to walk back the fact that the border really is not closed. Now let's go ahead and get into this short little clip, and then I'll throw you a great, great show from DeSantis. And I can't tell you how much this man uh, needs to be a role model for most of these Republicans around running these states. Tired of the rhinos. I wish more of our conservative base was a lot like Trump and DeSantis, and a little bit like Abbott.
6,000 illegal immigrants to D.C. The Democrat mayor has said, this is a crisis! Well, no kidding. If you think 6,000 is bad, try 3.5 million. And look, if the mayor doesn't like 6,000, I'll tell you what Texas ought to do. We ought to send her 600,000.
Yes.
We ought to send them to Martha's Vineyard, and to Nantucket, and to Rehoboth Beach, Delaware, and to the Hamptons, and to Cupertino, California.
Yeah.
All the places that rich, hypocritical liberals drink Chardonnay with their pinkies in the air.
This is good stuff too, folks. Check this out right here. I love it. I love it. This is a good speech right here. This is exactly what needs to be said by every governor that doesn't like the way Biden is treating us.
Was a little bit perplexed when I heard that the president is scrambling to get his cabinet together to try to address the fact that you have governors who are helping to relocate illegal aliens to sanctuary cities. Now, he didn't scramble to get his cabinet together when we had millions of people illegally pouring across the southern border. He didn't scramble to get his cabinet together when you had 53 migrants die in some trailer in Texas because they were neglected by the federal government. You didn't see him scramble to get his cabinet together when we had Americans that were victimized by criminal aliens that he led across the border. You didn't see him scramble to get his cabinet together when we hit record fentanyl deaths, which that fentanyl is coming across his open border. It's only when you have 50 illegal aliens end up in a very wealthy, rich sanctuary enclave that he decides to scramble on this. And so I think what we are doing I think what we're continuing to do is use every tool at our disposal to insulate the state of Florida from the negative ramifications of his reckless border policies. And yes, that involves helping with transport. It involves suing on catch and release, which we have done. It's involved making sure that contractors are held accountable if they're facilitating this into our state. And we have a statewide grand jury that's looking at different types of practices that may be going on in the state that's exacerbating the problem. And so the end of the day, this is a massive policy failure by the president. This is a massive and intentional policy that is causing huge amount of damage all across the country, and it's all rooted in a failure to take care that the laws are faithfully executed and to fulfill his oath of office. And so instead of scrambling and worrying about a bunch of rich people and having 50, and oh, by the way, they already bust them out. They're gone. They said we want everyone, no one's illegal, and they're gone within 48 hours. And so why not actually look at what's going on? There were more Acela corporate journalists in Martha's Vineyard today than have ever gone down to the southern border to look what's going on. Why don't you go down there and look what some of those communities have to deal with every day? All right.
I agree.
Anybody?
How many of those 50 that you referenced started their flights in Crestview en route to Martha's Vineyard? How many are from Florida, those 50?
So what we're doing is, and so we got the $12 million for the legislature thanks to these guys. And honestly, I have to say, on a bipartisan way, almost every Democrat voted for our $12 million for relocation. They're complaining now, but they all voted for it. So we've done stuff in the Panhandle, but what we found is we haven't seen any major movements of people into Florida like big caravans. The only caravans we saw were people that had H-2A visas. Well, those are obviously legal workers. So we've interdicted people on a onesie, twosie basis, and we said, okay, so we've had people in Texas for months trying to figure out how are these people getting into Florida, what's the movement? And the reality is 40% of them say they want to go to Florida. And so that's a lot, I mean, when you talk about all those people. But the problem is if they're coming in through with like 3 people in a car and they go through, it's hard for us to know because they're just coming into the state like any other car. So if there's not a big movement. So they've been in Texas identifying people that are trying to come to Florida and then offering them free transportation to sanctuary jurisdictions. And so they went from Texas to Florida to Martha's Vineyard with a flight. There's also going to be buses, and there will likely be more flights. But I'll tell you this, the legislature gave me $12 million. We're going to spend every penny of that to make sure that we're protecting the people of the state of Florida.
That's right.
Because most of them are intending to come to Florida. They are coming to Florida. We are taking them from Florida to sanctuary jurisdictions. But the issue is if you want to do it effectively, you just can't police if you have 2 people in a car and there's 100 different cars that come in a different week because it looks like your car or anybody else. And so we've put a lot of emphasis in this. There's been a lot of investigation to try to figure out how this is going. I initially, when I asked for the money, thought Biden was going to be busing because, you know, he has sent midnight flights all around this country. You know, they're complaining about 1 nice flight or 2 flights into Martha's Vineyard. He will dump people in the middle of the night without anybody knowing. They've done it in Florida, they've done it in New York, they've done it in other parts of the country. And so we were anticipating that. In reality, what the federal government's been doing, they're just abandoning these people. So these are people that are just kind of left high and dry. A lot of them are trying to hitchhike. Some of them will pay smugglers to bring them into different states, including the state of Florida. And so our view is you got to deal with it at the source. And if they're intending to come to Florida, or many of them are intending to come to Florida, that's our best way to make sure that they end up in a sanctuary. And why sanctuary jurisdiction? Well, they give them benefits. They do. And so that's likely what they're going to do. Why are we not doing that? Because we're not a sanctuary state. And we want to make sure that we have people here legally. And the thing is, the cost associated, and the thing is yes, the drugs have been catastrophic. There are criminal aliens coming across the border, no question. But even just the sheer volume of people, when you impose that on communities, that's massive cost to just the social system, education, healthcare, public safety, all those different things get very, very taxed. And you saw that in stark relief when one of the wealthiest enclaves in America, indeed the world, said they didn't have the resources to deal with 50 people. Well, how do you think some of these border towns feel? How do you think some of the people in Florida have felt that have seen the drugs or seen criminal activity? And so that's what we're really trying to do. We want to make sure that taxpayers are not having to foot tens of thousands or thousands of people coming in illegally, and that's the most effective way to do it. Yes, ma'am. So, yeah, I think that's totally false. I think if you look, the folks that are contracted, not only do they give them a release form to sign, they actually give them a packet, and in that packet included a map of Martha's Vineyard. So it was obvious that that's where they were going, and they gave that to them. And here's the thing, it's all voluntary because it's just the type of thing where we think that's the right way to do it. I mean, I think that if the states could send, I would send back to Mexico or back to the home country. But
Absolutely.
Here we are doing it voluntarily. They sign a release, and then they get a packet. So they did get a packet that had the map of Martha's Vineyard, and they're also treated, you know, very well with all this. I mean, they're treated well with meals and everything. This is not, I saw somebody on CNN try to say, sending 50 illegal aliens to wealthy Martha's Vineyard is reminiscent of the Holocaust. And I just thought to myself, has the world gone totally mad? I mean, these are voluntary transportation that they're signing up for, but they're given a good ride, they're given everything, and that's just, you know, it's a humane thing to do. What's not humane is what Biden is doing. He's given a false promise, the border's open, luring people to come here for political purposes, and then basically cutting these people loose and leaving them high and dry. What he should say is, you know, our border's not open. You know, there's ways to apply to come to this country, but just simply barreling across the border is not one of them. And I think you can trace all this back to him coming to office and reversing President Trump's policies, not because Trump's policies were wrong. It was all just a big virtue signal because they don't like Trump, so they have to do everything the opposite of him. Well, now I think we've seen with New York City and D.C., when they used to beat their chest when Trump was in office saying they were sanctuary jurisdictions, and then the minute Texas starts busing there, then they get very bent out of shape about it. And so let's just do good policy. I am happy that and these are just the beginning efforts. I mean, we've got an infrastructure in place now. There's going to be a lot more that's happening. But I'm glad that this has now put this issue on the front burner, because it really should be on the front burner, because this is an intentional policy that is having really negative implications for not just border communities, but for communities all across the country. And I think there needs to be accountability, and we need to make sure that we know, do people stand for secure border? Do they want to make sure that Florida is not going to be a sanctuary state? And how are you coming out on all those issues? Very important. Yes, ma'am.
So you're saying they signed a release form, and then they were given a map to Martha's Vineyard, but before they signed the form, they were told they were going to Florida?
So no. They are identified as wanting to go to Florida. You know, when they come in, so I had people last summer at the border, and I didn't, you know, we were just trying to help Texas, and my guys were like, you know, a lot of these people want to come to Florida. I'm like, oh man. So then more recently, we have people on the ground there, and it's pretty consistent, about 40% mention Florida. And so what we're trying to do is profile, okay, who do you think is going to try to get to Florida? And if they get in a car with two other people, there's no way we're going to be able to detect that. So you're trying to identify who's most likely to come. And then obviously, if they end up coming to Florida, then that's going to impose a lot of costs on the communities. And so we're trying to avoid that. So that's how you're doing it. They're not told that they're going to stay in Florida. They're told that their ultimate destination, in this case, was up in Massachusetts and with Martha's Vineyard. Yeah, so what we do, I mean, so, you know, we've hired a contractor. There's a bunch of stuff that's gone into creating the infrastructure. Obviously, we've also, you know, done the flights. You know, we may collaborate, but I got $12 million for us to use, and so we are going to use it. And you're going to see more and more, but I'm going to make sure that we exhaust all those funds, because I think it's important. I think people want to see that we're actually standing up and trying to protect the state against Biden's really, really reckless policies.
For more flights, are there any concrete plans set
So look, these are ongoing things. I mean, so you're going to look. Obviously, there's going to be buses like Texas is doing. There may be some more flights. Martha's Vineyard is a little bit different because it's an island, so you kind of got to either fly in there or take a ferry. So that was one way to do it. But there's a whole bunch of other places. But I would say that all we're trying to do is offer transport to sanctuary jurisdictions, free to the alien, but certainly not mandatory. And that way, they're able to go. And these sanctuary jurisdictions can put their money where their mouth is. They can provide the resources. They can do all of that. And then once that happens, the chance of folks coming to Florida is probably very, very low. So that's why we're doing it. And I think we're going to continue to do it.
Good answer. Good answer.
Yes. I think it'll be all of it. I mean, obviously, I think you guys know, if you go to southern Volusia County, there's a lot of people that commute into Kennedy and have done that for a long time. You look at a place like Embry-Riddle and what they offer here. So yes, there's a lot of great opportunities right here in Daytona Beach. And it'll really, I mean, some of this is going to affect Jacksonville because you've had companies Jacksonville and be in Jacksonville. We'll go all the way down to Indian River and St. Lucie counties with some of this stuff. So I think this whole stretch is primed for a really, really good run. What's that? Are you saying that Florida's borders are closed to asylum seekers? So no, I mean, I think this is the important thing. So, we have a lot of refugees. I mean, we have people that come really want to help, those relatively small number of people who do qualify. Yes. So the governor of California sent a letter to the Department of Justice saying you need to prosecute Texas and Florida governors. And all I can say is I think his hair gel is interfering with his brain function.
That's what I'm talking about.